Before we get started with this episode of Let's Get Surety, we want to thank our sponsor, Old Republic Surety, for sponsoring not only this episode of Let's Get Surety, but also NASBP's virtual seminars for the third year in a row. For more information about Old Republic Surety, visit www.orsurety.com. Now, let's get started with the show.
You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Get Surety. Today we're going to be talking about e-signature and electronic bonding. And to do that, I have with me my co-host, Mark McCallum. Hey, Mark.
Hey, pleasure to be here, Kat.
Always great to have you on as my co-host. And our guest today is Michael Pitre. He's the Chief Operating Officer at Gray Surety. And thanks so much for joining us today, Michael. We're excited to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk today a little bit about e-bonding, but before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Gray Surety?
Sure. I've been with Gray Surety for about 7 years. Myself and Cullen Piskey came on as the management team back in, I believe, April of 2013. So it's been a little while. Before that, I was in consultancy, and before that, I was an officer in the Marine Corps for 8 years. So Surety, I've come to Surety later in life than a lot of people do. I think I started at around age 34, but it feels like a real career now for me. It's been a little while. Gray Surety, we are a nationwide shop. We have offices in Phoenix, Texas, Alabama, but we're home officed in Louisiana. We are a standard shop, 10 over 35 programs. We dabble in collateral funds control, SBA, but we really are a standard surety in the 10 to 35 space.
Okay. And I know you guys have started using DocuSign for e-signature. Is that right?
It is. We have.
And how long ago did you roll that out?
We rolled it out about 6 months ago. We got rumblings in the market that some other sureties were beginning to roll out electronic signatures. Actually, let me revise that. It was late last year. I said 6 months because it only really became an important selling feature after COVID.
Time's all relative right now, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. When was that? No, it was about, I believe it was, now looking back at my timeline here on my computer, it was November of 2019 when we first began offering electronic signatures through DocuSign.
Michael, it sounds like you had really great timing. You were ahead of the curve and looking at how you could make your process more efficient. And then with COVID coming on, that sounds like that was the right move. How did you get comfortable with the idea of using electronic signatures? Were you concerned at all about fraud? We
were, and we got comfortable with it the way we get comfortable with everything, which is long conversations with our legal department. But we began looking at everything. So backing up a little bit, I mean, a notary is really a Roman era technology, right? We've been using this since around 100 AD. This is the way we verify a signature through a court-appointed public official who
so just a little while.
Yeah, maybe we should be revising the 1900-year-old technology a little bit for the times. We got comfortable by looking at various products that DocuSign offers, and these products are not specific to DocuSign. There are other providers out there for digital signatures. But there are a few different ways to do identity verification. I can talk about the ways that I've reviewed, and I can talk about the ways that Gray Surety verifies identification.
That would be great, yeah.
So some of their ID verification options involve external APIs with LexisNexis and a few other like credit bureau type service providers, where your name is John Smith, you live at this address, this is your social security number. That some identity verification features will use that information to reach out to LexisNexis and ask the signer a series of verification questions, such as, if you are truly John Smith, what was the color of your Camaro that you owned in 1986, according to the bin search or whatever, and you have to answer red or blue or whatever it is. And it'll go through a list of those questions from publicly available information, or I guess not so publicly available information on their LexisNexis. That's one way to do it. We went for a product called DocuSign ID Verify, wherein the signer uses their smartphone to scan their ID. And that gives us a couple levels of comfort. One, DocuSign records both the IP address of the internet connection through which the signer is accessing the document. And it also records, I believe, the MAC address of the phone, the MAC being the device-specific ID of their phone. So you have the IP address recorded, the MAC address recorded, and then they use their smartphone camera to scan the front and back of their ID. DocuSign then bounces that off of their internal databases that they have access to through the various motor vehicle departments of all the states, and confirms, yes, this is a valid ID that this person has. It is. It ties back to the public databases. So now you have a person with this ID verified through public databases at this IP address and with this MAC address, put their signature down on the document at this day and time, and we have all of that recorded. That to me is way more secure than a notary. And maybe I'm going to make notaries angry, but that to me, there's a lot more going on there than someone with a stamp from the state, because, people will contest that they were there. That's not my signature. I don't know that notary, whatever. They can't really contest the encrypted, verified IP address and MAC address was used to sign a document at a certain date.
That's just letting you collect a lot more information, it sounds like.
It does. And so we believe it's as secure, if not more secure, than getting a notarized GIA signed with wet signatures. And also there's a lot more records we can fall back on. All of this is to say, I don't believe, and I followed the case law pretty closely, I don't believe this has been adjudicated yet. That's the only part of this that's kind of left out, is a court case to say, yes, this is valid. There's some case law out there, but it's not foolproof quite yet.
Right. Now, did you look at all that remote notarization statutes in certain states to see if that provided any comfort?
We did. But again, the law is what a judge says it is, or a jury. Right. Eventually, all of that provided a level of comfort for us. But we do know that we're still sort of out there on the edge. I think I can name a few other sureties that do electronic signatures standard. I know the SBA has begun allowing electronic signatures on their forms, which is a big deal. Yeah. Suddenly, when you have a federal agency using electronic signatures, it becomes a lot harder to argue that they aren't standard.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because there are a lot of there's federal regulations and certainly state laws that provide that electronic signatures are to be given the same legal weight as wet ink signatures, and yet it seems like a lot of public agencies just have lagged behind adopting that. So kind of what you described, sounds like it's a great reason for public owners to build that comfort level with a DocuSign document.
I would hope so. But then again, with public owners, you're dealing with contracting officers. And contracting officers, their opinions of these things vary person to person. Now we're getting kind of off the topic of electronic signatures for general indemnity agreements. Now we're talking about signatures more broadly, which I'm happy to talk about too, although our principal use of DocuSign now is GIAs.
Nice. Okay. Um, so are there certain like best practices, that at least you use with DocuSign or a similar technology?
Yes.
Um, and I'm sure there are probably quite a number. Are there certain ones that you would like to kind of spotlight for us?
Absolutely. I'll stick to the best practice. So the best practices that we use are very specific to this ID scanning feature.
Okay.
Okay.
And I know that there is competition right now out there between the different methods, being verification questions based on a LexisNexis search versus scanning an ID. I personally think the ID scanning is going to win out in this, VHS versus Betamax competition between how digital signatures are verified. As far as best practices go, you really have to talk the signer through the technology. I've ended up, and I'm the COO of the company, but I've ended up holding a lot of hands through of some of our signatories on how to get their ID verified. Sometimes they do not have a smartphone.
Right.
Perhaps some older folks still on the flip phones, in a way that they've come almost full circle now. They're the cool kids. But so you have to dissuade them from trying to upload a blurry JPEG of their ID.
Oh yeah.
The blurriness of the camera phone picture of the ID is one of the great annoyances of my life currently, is having to talk people through over and over again. Nope, it's still blurry. You gotta make sure there's no smudges on the ID. You gotta make sure all the machine readable zones, such as the barcodes and also the name as it's written out on the ID, is not smudged from being inside a leather wallet for 15 years. You have to make sure someone's not going to try to do all of this from their desktop computer, like dropping their ID into the copy machine to make a scan and then try to drag that scan over. That's a big problem. The way I explain it through to people is, and this is again for people who have smartphones, do it like you're depositing a check with your mobile banking app, right? Make sure it's as clear as possible. Here's the issue, and we're talking about DocuSign specifically. All of this is happening through the web browser on the phone, because you can, as the surety or as whoever is requesting the ID, requesting the signature, you can force the signatory to download the DocuSign app to their phone. We don't want to do that for a lot of reasons. So it jumps from a text message on their phone, takes them into the web browser on their phone, which means, unlike your banking app, it's not going to automatically reject a blurry ID photo.
Okay.
And so you'll have someone trying over and over and over again to get their ID verified using their phone, not realizing that it's blurry. It's allowing them to upload blurry pictures as opposed to rejecting them out of hand like your banking app would do. So I don't know if I've gotten into best practices exactly, but I've gotten into some tripwires.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, because what you're saying is that people need to pay attention to, what they're doing, so it's not a low resolution photograph. And I'm not sure that is really automatic, that people would think that way, but now they really do need to think that way to make sure that this technology works like it should.
Yeah, and what you want to have control, like particularly as me, I'm the COO of a company. I want to have control of everything that's going on all the time to the detriment of everyone around me constantly, I'm sure. But in this case, it's out in the world, and you really, unless you're standing behind someone as they're doing it, you can't be quite sure that they're doing it right. Although I would say, a little anecdote, early on, right after we rolled out DocuSign for GIAs, we had a principal who was local to the New Orleans area, I think 15 minutes from our home office, which is not something you get all the time. Like I said, we're coast to coast.
Yeah.
And she could not get it to work. And so I said, come to the Gray Surety office and bring your ID and bring your husband. And so I ended up, and they had their grandson with them. I said, give him some dry erase markers and said, draw on my whiteboard while I help your grandmother and grandfather scan their IDs. And it took me about 5 minutes. I got it verified on the first try. But not everyone is local who can come to your office and sit down with you while you do it.
Right.
The pain points involved with people who are unable to verify their ID using this system are kind of problematic. You're offering it as an easier way to get this GIA signed, so you don't have to go gather at a notary's office, particularly back in April, May, when there wasn't a notary office open anywhere in the state of California, for instance. You're offering this as a value add. Hey, this is an easier way to do it. But then they have to try 6 or 7 times to get their ID to scan so they can verify their identity before they put an electronic signature on. That becomes kind of institutional risk. Like, we're trying to be the surety who's easy to do business with, but are we making this too hard? Which is when you fall back on, maybe that LexisNexis deal isn't so bad.
But it does seem like DocuSign is a brand that is getting more well known, and so hopefully then people are getting more accustomed to what that might involve. You had mentioned obviously that you're focused on the general indemnity agreements. Do you foresee then Gray using this technology for bonds and other documents?
Well, I mean, the bonds are all executed out at the agency level, right? So agents execute bonds on our behalf. If they want to use electronic signatures, we're happy to accept them. We're using them right now on documents that we need signed. And we're moving it beyond GIAs at this point. For anything that needs to get signed, if someone tries to print something up with notary blocks, I lose my mind. Like, hey, we have a new thing now, right? We don't do that anymore with the notary block.
Right.
So you said you're moving beyond GIAs. What other forms are you moving towards having electronic signature or DocuSign?
All of our agency agreements for new agency appointments, all of our producer applications, anything involving funds control agreements, literally anything, any document that's executed in-house by the surety and not farmed out to our agency partners, we're executing with DocuSign in-house. Simply because it's easier, and here we are in the future, and everything's closed. So let's give someone a chance to sign it at their house.
Right, and you sound like you have that. You feel like from that authentication, that avoid fraud, that it's a superior path than just a regular notary path.
I honestly do. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I would agree with you, actually. Yeah. And as you said, the notary technology was great during Roman times, and it's kept going. But maybe it's time to take a look and do things in a more efficient and perhaps even more safe mode. So I think, I'd applaud Gray for going in this direction.
This is slightly off topic. Okay, it's entirely off topic. But I was reading the other day about the first railroad tracks in Great Britain in the 19th century. And the gauge.
Narrow gauge?
Yeah, why they have that gauge of track, why the tracks are that far apart. It's because they were laid down on old Roman roads. And so the distance between tracks on those original British railway lines is the exact distance between the wheels on a Roman chariot.
That's a great factoid.
Yeah,
I always wondered what kind of warranty the Romans gave with those roads, because they lasted quite a long time in many instances.
What are we doing wrong with these roads?
So, it sounds like Gray is doing a lot and looking at technology, trying to make their processes more efficient. Are there other technologies that you guys are looking at for the foreseeable future and try to make it either more efficient for clients and or the producers you work with?
Yes. We want to be the surety who is easy to do business with in every respect, in every way. And my role as the COO is to make the underwriters happy and more efficient. Gray Surety has been software focused for the last 7 years. We have our own internal software suite that handles everything from agency appointments through underwriting, through bond issuance, through claims, through bond closing. Everything is done in a single software stack, single pane of glass. And I come from a software development background. I spent a lot of time over at our parent company, the Gray Insurance Company, which is mainly a workers' compensation and a general liability carrier for large contractors and industrial concerns. I helped design a system over there whereby an agent will send an accord form to an email address with all of the loss runs and all of that information that's vital to underwriting a workers' comp account on the casualty side. And our system will just scrape everything off of the accord form and drop it into a submission file with the database field such that the casualty side underwriter just hits a button and it returns essentially it rates the risk. It will return bound policies just from scraping off of an accord form. And that my great bugaboo always has been the lack of standardized financials for surety, the way that the casualty side has those standardized accord forms.
Right.
And I know XBRL has just been the promised solution for how many years now? Just still kind of out there in the future a little bit. So at Gray, what we're working on now for the coming year is a solution by which WIPs and financial statements formatted in any way can be scraped from a PDF directly into our financial analysis tool and our WIP analysis tool without having to have an underwriter or an underwriting assistant key punch financials for 2 hours a day. Instead, if they just upload the PDF and it takes them through a series of questions. This number, do you want this number to apply to accounts receivable? Do you want this number to apply to cash and equivalents? Do you want this number to apply to cost to complete? Right. That's what we're working on now. That's sort of an internal tool. It right. does, I would hope, help us get answers back to our agents quicker. If instead of having to spend 3 hours inputting inputting a submission into our analysis tools for financials and WIPs, instead of spending hours doing that and then getting back to the agent, spend 20 minutes doing that and then get back to the agent.
That's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excited.
I mean, getting that data transference and without all the keying in and all that, as you said, XBRL, people are working on that. Hopefully it will realize the promise. But again, that's fantastic that you are looking at doing that now.
Yeah.
I would be thrilled if XBRL beat me to the punch.
Yeah.
I would bear XBRL no ill will.
Well, that is great. Well, thanks for sharing your insights. I mean, this is very exciting. Certainly the COVID situation is providing more of a catalyst. It's nice to hear that you were already going in this direction before it even occurred.
Yeah.
And again, thanks for pushing forward these advancements in technology that you're using.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the chance to get to say out loud, hey, we were doing this before COVID, guys.
And Michael, if anyone wants to find out more about Gray Surety that's listening, where should they go on the web?
graysurety.com or find me on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Let's Get Surety. Brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.
Before we go, we just wanted to say thank you again to Old Republic Surety for their generous support in sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety. For more information on Old Republic Surety, visit www.orsurety.com.